Good evening. Thanks for joining us here on APTN National News Weekend. I'm Dennis Ward. A small First Nation on Vancouver Island has revealed its discovery of more potentially unmarked graves near a former residential school. APTN's Tina House was there and has this report.
As Eagle Down is danced in, blessing the ground, the Shayshot First Nation prepares to share the heartbreaking news that more potentially unmarked graves have been discovered just steps away from here. And here in this gym, which is one of the last remaining structures from the Alberni Indian Residential School, hundreds gathered to hear about the results of an extensive search undertaken by the Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council to find the truth behind so many horrific stories from former students. Although official school records state that 29 kids died while attending the AIRS, elected Chief Ken Watts says the research tells a different story.
We can verify the 67 children never made it home. Some of them did when were brought, but 67 passed away as students of ours. And now we've identified 17 suspected graves.
And for many, the news was difficult to hear. These teddy bears represent the kids who died here. In 1893, the Presbyterian Church built the Alberni Girls' Home, and in 1925, the United Church took it over, establishing the Alberni Indian Residential School. Kids from all across BC were forced to come here. Over the years, many kids became ill, which led to numerous outbreaks, including influenza, the measles, and the mumps, to name a few, and many succumbed to those illnesses, but for others, they just disappeared. And behind these walls, dark and inhumane treatment took place, including physical, mental, and sexual abuse. In 1973, chiefs from across the West Coast demanded the school be shut down. Former president of the Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council, Cliff Atleo, was once a student here from 1954 to 1963. He says he was hit by a supervisor when he was a boy and suspects that's partly the reason why he has hearing aids on both sides now. He recalled a story about a 15-year-old classmate of his.
And then I see the supervisor punch one of our older boys, who's gone now, but for no reason, for supposedly smirking at the supervisor. He was an ex-Army guy, and I remember we used to line up in a basement before meals and stuff and call him. As soon as he got close, he punched him. Blood splattered all over the place.
In 1995, former supervisor Arthur Henry Plint was sentenced to 11 years in prison from sexual assaults on young boys in his care, the judge stating that Plint was a sexual terrorist at his sentencing. With only 10% of the ground being searched, many are saying they are bound to find more unmarked graves. Tina House, APTN National News, Port Alberni.
Nearly 2 weeks ago, the federal government dished out a $2 million contract. It was for an international organization to provide help on unmarked graves found at residential schools. The National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is increasingly voicing its displeasure to hire the Netherlands-based organization. Fraser Needham has more.
Nearly 2 years ago, 751 possible unmarked graves were found on the Kiosan First Nation, joining scores of others found on other First Nations before and since. The National Center for Truth and Reconciliation says it was not consulted when the government hired the International Center for Missing Persons, or ICMP. Cynthia Wesley-Escuma is the chair of NCTR's governing circle. She calls the move a slap in the face to all the Indigenous organizations that have expertise in the area.
All it does is actually makes, I think, everybody feel like the government of Canada is just doing what it's always done and not trusting and not supporting or not thinking somehow that there's a competency level in the Indigenous community to manage this. So they brought in external forces from another country entirely that has not actually worked with our people in the past.
Last Friday, Crown Indigenous Relations posted a copy of the $2 million technical arrangement it had signed with ICMP on its website. But Wesley Eskima says this has done little to lessen NCTR's concerns.
They have not been able to give us a list of the communities that have actually agreed to this conversation that they're going to actually be touching base on. We don't have that. They haven't shared that with us. The survivors have not been accommodated on this. Why not speak with the survivor circle? Who, if anyone, knows each other better?
According to the technical arrangement, the organization will then present a final report to the government on June 15th. But instead, Wesley Eskima says what the government should really do at this point is take a step back.
I think they should put it on pause for certain. I think they should have a session immediately with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, with the survivor circles and people across the country that have actively been engaged in this conversation.
In an emailed statement, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Mark Miller's office says that a cross-country outreach and engagement campaign with Indigenous communities to identify unmarked graves on the sites of former residential schools is ongoing. And ICMP, NCTR, and the Special Interlocutor are part of this process. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Meanwhile, the federal government says it's moving ahead on its promise to release more residential school documents. Earlier this week, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller appointed Cowessess First Nation Chief Cadmus DeLorme as the chairperson of the new Residential School Documents Advisory Committee. He will oversee the release of documents from government departments to be sent to the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation in Winnipeg. In 2021, DeLorme Saskatchewan First Nation made headlines after 751 possible unmarked graves were discovered on the site of the former residential school. DeLorme is upbeat about the new appointment.
This is going to open up Cowessess to go to the National Center now for government records. Right now, we couldn't go to the government and just ask for their records. There's just confidentiality and government policies. So this is just going to open up, and our goal is to put names to unmarked graves, to that make sure that no unmarked grave is left unmarked anymore.
And a reminder, the National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. In other news, in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, a decision about Odelia and Erisa Kiosan's bail hearing was scheduled for this past Thursday. Last month, Justice Donald Lay delayed a decision because he was about to go on holidays. So he had scheduled a court date for Thursday. APTN's Priscilla Wolfe was in Yorkton to update us on what happened.
Odelia and her sister had a bail hearing on January 17th and 18th in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. They were convicted in 1994 of second-degree murder in the death of 70-year-old farmer Anthony Joseph Dolph near Campsack. Their cousin, Jason Cashane, eventually claimed responsibility for the murder. Defense lawyers asked for the sisters to get a conditional release with limited conditions while their case undergoes a federal review for a possible miscarriage of justice. The bail hearing started in late January. On the second day, Justice Lay said he wouldn't be making a decision until returning from holidays. Today in court, Judge Lay said that he needs even more time to decide and scheduled another court date for Monday, March 27th at 9 a.m. However, he reserved the right to make a decision before that date. Priscilla Wolfe, APTN National News, Yorkton.
Odelia Kiosan and her lawyer Deanna Harris spoke to APTN News after the hearing.
It is upsetting, and my lawyers, we gave our plan and they gave their plan, and to keep us on parole and then in bail, like we can be a success out on bail, and we shouldn't have. I'm upset, yes. but I'm not going to give up.
Justice Lay is a really thoughtful judge, so I'm confident that his decision is going to be very well reasoned, and that it will be well thought out and have, a solid basis in the law.
Another Indigenous woman is leaving politics, describing the BC legislature as torture. That story and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. Melanie Mark, the first Indigenous woman to be elected to the BC legislature, announced she's stepping down from her position. While holding an eagle feather and wearing her grandfather's jacket, Mark announced she will be resigning her Vancouver Mount Pleasant seat at the end of March. She had served as Minister of Advanced Education, Tourism, Sport and Culture. In a press conference, Mark says it was difficult to create change due to colonial roadblocks within the BC government. She called her time in the legislature torture.
This place felt like a torture chamber. I will not miss the character assassination.
An Indigenous recruitment event in Saskatchewan attracted dozens of potential RCMP officers. The 3-day session in Regina was the first of its kind. Attendees had the chance to tour the training academy and experience cadet training. The goal is to put Indigenous officers into the ranks and bring their perspective to policing. These officers will be posted back to their home communities.
The goal is to bring 2 troops of Indigenous people to Regina, obviously to become police officers. We had 36 applicants attend. That was a good number to have. We were actually one of the bigger groups in training at the time, so it was neat to see. We got to show them over the 4-day span what depot life is like. This is such a bonus to any Indigenous person that wants to have a career in the RCMP.
Trappers are bringing their knowledge of the land inside the walls of the Yellowknife jail. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs checked out the program where inmates have the opportunity to connect with culture while learning practical skills.
It's a little smaller than the animals Roy and Iktalak normally harvests back home in Ulaqtuk, Northwest Territories. But nonetheless, he enjoys the change of pace, bringing the outdoors indoors to pass the time.
Yes, I started hunting when I was 5 years old, and I've been on it since. I've never stopped. Can't live without native foods. I love doing stuff like this because it helps try to keep the tradition alive and pass on knowledge from generation to generation upon generations.
See, look at that. Inuktalik is one of half a dozen inmates attending today's drop-in land-based educational programming at the North Slave Correctional Complex in Yellowknife. The program has been in operation for over a year. It runs on a 5-week cycle with 2 in-class sessions on trip planning and survival and another on economics and regulations around trapping. But then there's the hands-on portion, learning tips and tricks on machine repair, shelter building, and skinning animals. It's also a chance to get some fresh air.
I help set up all events like this, and we do shoveling out in the front, getting the snow off the walkway there. We do fire.
Dean McNeely of Fort Good Hope NWT says the program feels like home.
Learning my culture and it's a really good experience and stuff, so I liked it. And I would. If you want ever to know. Well, I would still try it if I had a chance. So.
Squirrel is only worth $2. You're going to get an additional $5.
The program is also facilitated by Environment and Natural Resource officers, who hope to provide inmates with an opportunity for income upon release.
With a lot of individuals, that sort of sharing becomes a big part of it. I am an expert at something. I can do this better than a lot of people. Not to do that, but I can share my knowledge with others, and I think that can feel very empowering for individuals.
I'm somebody doing that too.
For Inuktitut, he'll continue harvesting when he gets out later this year for some extra cash. But more importantly, he'll have sharpened his skills and will be ready to bring his 3 daughters out on the land.
It keeps me calm, like I actually makes me feel like I'm worthy again. Polar bear, wolves, foxes, rabbits, muskox, caribou, yeah, anything with 4 legs and a heartbeat, basically, yeah.
Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Still to come, a snowmobile ride for a cause. Stick around. Welcome back. It's not your typical boys' trip. For its 50-something participants, the first ever First Nations expedition is a test of long endurance on a snowmobile and a rallying cry for Indigenous causes. Our Lindsay Richardson was there for the takeoff.
Vous êtes des guerriers pour la réconciliation, puis vous faites ça dans la justice pour nous tous.
With the smell of exhaust in the air, the First Nations expedition surges ahead, traveling the first leg of a 3-week, 4,500-kilometer journey into the depths of ancestral Indigenous territory.
Surtout hâte d'aller voir, de partager tout l'amour qu'on envoie ici. C'est de l'amour, c'est de la chaleur, c'est l'être humain. C'est ça la réconciliation.
It's a first-of-its-kind expedition, bringing together 56 participants from First Nations across the province in hopes of bringing awareness to causes of interest. The death of Manawan member Joyce Echequan, for one. Every child matters, and the impacts of residential schools are others, as well as MMIWG.
There are strong messages behind all of this. It needs courage, and I think that's what our people need to see.
But pulling it together was not an overnight feat. It's been 2 years in the making. Machines are rigorously checked before takeoff, with participants checking supplies off a long list.
We need to have lots of stuff, surviving stuff for the whole expedition. It's about 250, 300 kilometers a day. So sometimes we'll be stopped in remote communities, and sometimes we'll need to stop and make our own tents and our own camping sets to spend the whole night.
Participants will be riding through areas not accessible by road and will rely on GPS and teamwork to navigate. But there's a lot of anticipation and a lot of unknown.
I'm seeing myself at the end because we're not sure of nothing. Anything can happen with those kinds of things. We might broke down, we might be wounded ourselves, which we don't know. But I'm seeing myself at the end of the line, and like we're saying, we made it. This is what we're aiming at.
There's also a lot of time to think. These folks will be riding between 9 to 12 hours a day. The quiet will be healing for some, like Debbie Flamand, the daughter of a residential school survivor.
C'est sûr que, premièrement, c'est pour me réconcilier moi-même. Des fois, dans la vie, on peut des fois prendre différents chemins, puis je veux trouver la paix, premièrement pour moi, et aussi de rencontrer des gens, puis de faire la réconciliation aussi entre nations.
For others, it's an excuse to escape their day job.
Well, I'm a lawyer, so normally it's a 16-hour day at my desk. So this is pretty different. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons people go out on the land. It's to just empty your head and be one with the moment and be as present as you could possibly be.
Stepping out of the halls of the National Assembly was Quebec Indigenous Affairs Minister Yann Lafrenière, bringing an important message.
OK, tout le monde, on cherche une clé pour un skidoo. Non, c'est pas vrai.
But in all seriousness,
on a lancé cette semaine une campagne de sensibilisation à la différence, à connaître les 11 nations, mais c'est un geste qui est concret. On est sur le terrain avec eux.
First stop, the Atikamekw communities of Wimotashi and Apitsawan, then to the Anishinaabe communities of Lac-Simon and Picogan, then the rugged terrain of Cree territory.
Riding across the lands of Indigenous lands is something that we're
reconnecting with the land and reconnecting with the people of the other Indigenous groups. We all have common issues, common interests, and we all hope for a better, a brighter future for ourselves, for our children, our future generations.
Barring complications, the expedition is expected to arrive to great fanfare in the Innu communities of Quebec's Côte-Nord by early March. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Manawan, Quebec.
Jamaican-Canadian Juno Award winner Julie Black gave a voice to Indigenous history on Sunday evening when she sang the Canadian national anthem at the NBA All-Star Game in Salt Lake City, Utah. Here's APTN's Chris Stewart now with some reaction.
Tens of thousands of basketball fans and millions around the world heard what one word can do to change a song. Award-winning singer-songwriter Julie Black changed one word at the beginning of O Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home on a native land.
Her social media had mostly positive comments on her take on the national anthem. APTN viewer Josh Littlechild told APTN that her one-word change had a big impact for him.
I felt really good hearing it. The visceral reaction that she was able to get out of changing one word that really spoke the truth about the history of Canada was brilliant, because it just brought out a lot of emotions from everyone. I really loved it.
And Littlechild says that the worldwide audience might help showcase the history and social issues faced by Indigenous peoples.
What an opportunity, like a great opportunity to take that issue and bring it to the world stage. I hope more artists follow, and I hope that could create awareness towards, I guess, our cause, but also hopefully it could change some attitudes towards some people, perception of Indigenous people in Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home on a native land.
One word can have plenty of power. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
And that is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. For news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy, have a great weekend.